Welcome to Interviews of Grief, the show where we explore the depths of human emotion. I'm your host, Megan Pruitt. Grief is a universal experience that often hides in the shadows of our lives, rarely discussed openly. But it's through these heartfelt conversations that we find healing and hope. This is where we bring to light the story of those who have faced loss and the myriad of emotions that come with it. We're here to discuss the good, the bad, and the sometimes ugly aspects of grief as we seek to honor the memories of those we've lost and extend a helping hand to others navigating the same path. So join us as we embark on this profound journey, turning sorrow into strength, one conversation at a time. In this episode of Interviews of Grief, you'll be touched by the courageous narrative of Jessica Heroux as she shares her heartbreaking journey of losing her mom, grandma, and uncle to COVID during the tumultuous months of April and May of 2020. Unfortunately, this theme of multi-generational loss has become all too common during the pandemic, where families faced swift and merciless tragedy. Jessica's mother served as an activities director at a nursing home, a place where Jessica also worked and where her grandmother resided. Together, Jessica and I share a common purpose to tell our story so that others don't feel alone. A heartfelt thank you to Jessica for bravely sharing her story and entrusting me to be part of this journey. I would like to welcome Jessica to Interviews of Grief. She and I connected on a Facebook group, and I'm really excited for her interview, for her to shed some light on something that is a reoccurring theme in COVID loss that I don't feel like gets enough attention. And that's the multi-generational loss, consecutive loss that's so unique to the pandemic. She lost her mom, her grandma, and then her uncle, all pretty much within a month or just thereabouts. So welcome to the show, Jessica, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So your story is, I think, unique, but not as unique as people would think, just because it's happened to so many different people, where, you know, they've lost like mom or grandma, or maybe they were living with like their uncle and their grandfather. And unfortunately, COVID knows no mercy whatsoever. So if you can just go ahead and tell me a little bit about your story.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
So me and my mom, we worked at a nursing home and my grandmother lived there. And I mean, COVID came through and it was rough. We didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom telling me, like, if I get COVID, I'm going to die from it. And I was just like, very like, okay. Because she was a very anxious person anyways. And she tended to go straight to doom most times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought it was another one of those moments where she was like, you know, because we didn't know anything about it. And it was hard because, like, before this, like, I didn't have significant loss. Like, I've lost friends to addiction and things like that. But family members, the only person I lost before this was my grandfather. And that was like 4 or 5 years prior. And, you know, when you're 30 years old, you're like, oh, I got another 30 years with my mom. Like,
Sure.
My grandmother, she was teeter-tottering for a while. So, but the suddenness of it, I think, is what really gets me. And we were working, and I remember my mom saying, a patient sneezed in my face, and I don't feel good. And I was like, okay. And now, mind you, she lived in the apartment above me, and we drove to work together every day. And so I'm sitting in the car with her while she's sitting here saying she doesn't feel well. And working at the nursing home during COVID, you get tested twice a week. And negative, negative, negative. Okay. And then she came back positive. And I remember it was April 8th, and she called me at like 11:02 a.m. and she was sobbing, and I was like, what's going on? She's like, I came back positive. And I'm like, crap. Okay. So now I'm getting called in to get retested because, you know, we drove to work together and drove home together. And, um, you know, I was like, okay, well, I'm still negative. Thankfully, I never caught it. I don't know how, because we were literally this far away.
Yeah.
Which still, the survivor's guilt gets me there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why her? In my brain, I try to negotiate, which is, I know, part of the grief cycle.
Yes.
Like, maybe if I would have had it and she had it, she wouldn't have had it so bad. But realistically, that's not what happened.
Right.
And I know that if she had that option, she would be like, nope, I don't want you to get it. I will take it. And this will continue to be the outcome.
Of course.
Because that's just who she was, you know? And then April 10th, she called me and I was at work and she was like, I can't breathe. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what are we like? Are we just anxious? Like, we can't breathe because we're anxious. We're panicking, you know, it feels like you're suffocating. And she was like, no, like, I literally can't go from my bed to the bathroom without being winded. And I'm like, okay, well, then why don't we call 911 and we can have them test your O2 and we'll go from there.
Right.
And she was like, okay. And I get a phone call at like, I don't know, maybe 7:30. She's like, I'm at the hospital. My O2 dropped to the low 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can't breathe. Okay.
Yeah.
You got there early. We will figure it out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like at this point, I think shock had kind of set in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember coming home from work and just, you know, doing what I always did, like, you know, undress in the hallway, you know, jump in the shower, bleach everything I touched because I don't want my family getting sick.
Right.
And I mean, the nursing home was a petri dish for COVID, if you will. And
Absolutely.
it was just so surreal. And she had left me a note and I still have it. And it just says, know when to let go. I love you.
Wow.
And she left me all her passwords to all her things, like all her bank account information. She left me an email of somebody that she asked me to message, like email them, just let them know what was going on. So of course I was just like, this is silly. Like, you're going to come home.
You're going to be fine. Yeah.
I'll see you in a few days. And then it was Tuesday night. It was April 14th.
Mm-hmm.
She calls me while I'm at work because of course I'm still working.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, I can't breathe. And I'm like, okay, well, you're in the right place, you know? And she's like, no, I'm on oxygen and I can't breathe. And I'm like, okay. And I'm still sitting here thinking like, this is going to pass, you know, like there's no way that this is it, you know? She was only 58 years old. There's no way.
Yeah.
And, you know, like in every mother-daughter relationship, you never get along when you're younger. And so we had just recently started like becoming friends.
Same here. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And having a 15-year-old of my own, I totally get it. I totally get it. I like,
they say it's payback, right? Yeah.
yeah. And it's just, she just kept saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. And I'm like, okay, stop talking. I'm like, I want you to put the subtitles on the TV. And she's like, for what? I'm like, read them.
Read it.
Focus, be mindful, do a mindful activity. And then I heard alarms beeping. And she's like, my O2 is dropping. And I'm like, okay.
Was she on nasal cannula at this point? Do you know? Yeah.
Yep. So I'm like, okay. And she hands the phone to the nurse, and the nurse is like, do I have consent to treat? And I'm like, yes. Like, what do you mean? Like, why are you asking me? Ask her. She's like, she signed paperwork today giving you power, like all medical. Yeah. So I'm not only is my mom not able to speak anymore, and I'm hearing beeping and I don't know what's going on, but now I'm told that I'm responsible for her medical decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. All at once. And that's how fast it happens.
So
fast.
Know? Yeah. Yeah. And I woke up to a phone call at 5:53 in the morning. While on oxygen, her O2 dropped to the low 40s.
Yeah.
They did CPR while they wheeled her up to the ICU, and she was on a vent.
Yeah.
And I still have the notebook. I called every day, every single day.
Oh, yeah.
What's her potassium? What are her x-rays look like? What is her O2 at? What's the ventilator at? Like, where are we? What's progressing? What options do we have? Where are we going from here? I very much went into survival mode.
Yeah.
Because that's my mom and I'm not going to lose her on my account.
Right.
And all this is going on. All this. And still working at the nursing home. And we lost resident after resident after resident. And so on top of like the family grief, there's this grief of clients that have become family.
Absolutely.
Dropping.
Yeah.
Unlike anything I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I've never seen a dead body up until this point.
Right.
And it's just, my grandmother came back negative, but she was still showing symptoms. And on April 26th, she came back positive.
Yeah.
And I went, okay. That same hopeful spirit, like,
yeah.
Okay, if my mom's in the situation she's in, like, I'm not going to lose my grandmother too.
No. Like, that's not an option here. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we can't, no, this is too much. We can't do both. Please pick one.
Yeah.
My grandmother was my person.
Yeah.
She was my person, she called me her angel from the day I was born. And it's kind of like bittersweet because now she's my angel.
Yeah.
And so because I worked at the nursing home that she lived at, I was able to go see her. And I spent 7.5 hours holding her hand the day before she died.
Yeah.
And the day she died, I went to work. I came home. I took a shower and I was on my way back and I get a phone call. She had passed.
Yeah.
But she signed a DNI.
Yeah.
She didn't want to go to the hospital.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that she did that until after she passed.
And
I just remember thinking, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you give up hope? And her doctor was like, she said she wanted to be there when your mom passed.
Oh, God.
And I went, my mom's not dead.
Yeah.
And then we video chatted with my mom and I told her, hey, Meme's gone. And my mom moved her hand.
Wow. Was she fully sedated, eyes open, or how did she tolerate the vent, like, at that point?
She was fully sedated.
Yeah. Yeah, same.
There was no...
Yeah. They say some people can be on the ventilator but be completely awake. Their mind won't override the vent. And for my mom, that, like, was not an option. Like, she could not. They tried to take her off of it so many times, and she would override, completely panic, and they'd have to resedate her.
See, they didn't try taking her out of sedation until May 1st.
Wow.
And even then, she didn't wake up.
So she's fully sedated. So just for people that don't know, these are the most heavy, serious drugs that you can come by. And I've learned through research that some of them, each drug has a different purpose. One is to keep you asleep. One is to erase your memory so that, this whole thing isn't traumatic, and everything has its purpose. But there is nothing that's more serious drugs, And so your mom is completely sedated. You tell her that your grandma's passed and she moves her hand.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was a very quick twitch. But looking back, that was the moment her soul left her body. She was no longer my mom at that point.
Yeah.
But of course, in the moment, I was not ready to accept that.
Yeah.
And then the day after my grandmother died, my aunt calls and my uncle Roger had passed from COVID.
Yeah.
He was older. He had health issues. But really, like now, you're choosing now. This is okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. This is how we're doing it. Sure. Yeah. So I get 3 days off from work because it's my grandmother and I don't know what to do. And they're like, go home, focus on your mom. Like, we need her to come back. And I'm like, crap.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm talking to my brother, who is, he's in active military,
Mm-hmm.
and he's not in the state. And I'm like, bro, you need to come home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's time.
we gotta figure this out. And everybody in my life was like, we're gonna hold out hope. And
Yeah.
at this point, I'm like, I need to be a realist, because if I'm making these decisions, she was the first one in Woonsocket to get the transfusion
Oh, wow.
for the antibodies. They were like, we just got approved for this. Come sign. I live 15 minutes from the hospital, and I
Yeah.
got there in less than 5.
Oh, yeah. I know.
I probably shouldn't say that, but it's whatever.
No, I know. I know
And
exactly what you mean, that
the
panic drive.
doctor
Yeah.
was sitting outside, and I ran, and I'm like, go, 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 go. Like,
Yeah.
go. He was like, okay, we should see 24 hours. If it's working, there'll be some kind of, but at this
Improvement.
point, her lungs were they were
Yes.
done.
I know.
Organs started failing. And I remember May 3rd, because we would video chat with her.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I needed to see her.
Yeah.
It wasn't real.
Yes. I know.
I mean, thankfully, the people at work were so supportive. Somebody actually stitched these little hearts.
Oh,
And I dropped one off to the hospital. So she had one in her hand, and I had the other one.
I love that.
And I just remember my daughter never wanting to see her.
Yeah.
And my nephews never wanting to see her. And I don't know why I didn't force them, but I was like, I encourage you to come. Like, I really encourage you to, like,
Yeah.
come say hi. And they did. And thankfully they did. And we were talking about how we had two options at this point. Earlier in the morning, we were talking about a trach.
Yeah.
That might cause a direct airflow. It could help improve. But there were two issues with that. One, if they were to transport her anywhere, she would die en route. No doubt. I didn't mean to rhyme. I'm sorry. That was
you're
funny.
fine.
However, at the hospital she was at, they didn't have anybody who specialized in that.
Yeah.
So it could do more damage than good.
Yeah.
So we were really weighing our options. And then we get off the phone, and the doctor calls me around 9:00 at night, and he was like, she's brain dead.
So they were able to determine that, because I always wondered, and my uncle and I pushed to be like, if we're going to do a trach, will she have mental function? Is she there?
Yeah.
So they knew.
They did some kind of scan of her brain.
Yeah.
And the only thing that was alive was the brainstem.
God, we had pushed for that, but they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it was, I think for her, it was more, they didn't understand why.
Wow.
They didn't understand why. She was, I don't know. Like, she was so young.
I know. I know.
And then I just remember sitting and talking to the nurse for like 2 hours on the phone. And I'm like, what if she dies? Like, I can't keep her alive at this point. She's not a human. She's a vegetable. And that's something she made very clear she didn't want to be.
Yes.
She won't ever come back to us. So now it was, do we pull the plug? Do we let her wait? Like, if we pull the plug, when do we do that? And how do we do that? Because they only were allowing 2 people in the room.
Yep.
And it's like, who do we have? Like, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to wait for my brother. He was going to get a flight later that week. And then May 4th came. And I remember it was 10:32 in the morning. And I had this gut feeling. Well, it was like 10:15. I had this gut feeling to call.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to call. Usually I called around 11:15 after shift change, give everybody enough time to check in, whatever.
Yes.
And the nurse was like, I see you. And I'm like, I'm just checking on, my mom. And At this point, everybody knew who I was. I called 3 times a day. I want updates.
Yeah.
I want, like,
Yeah.
the doctors would call twice a day to inform me. And I hear beeping, and I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're going to have to call you back. I'm like, okay, cool. It wasn't until recently that I found out it was my mom coding.
Yeah.
They called back at 10:32 in the morning, and I don't remember what she said. I remember her saying the word expired.
Oh.
And I said, she's not fucking milk.
Yeah.
Excuse my language.
No, go for it, girl. Get it out.
And I just remember silence. I don't remember anything else. I just remember dropping to the ground and screaming.
Yeah.
Because how can 3 people you love die in 6 days?
I know. I can't even imagine. Mm-mm.
And then it was just plan mode, you know?
Yeah.
Who do we have to call? And I remember the first call I make being my brother.
Yeah.
And he answered the phone. And he was like, hey, what's the update this morning? And he was like, you called early. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, no. I was like, yeah, I'm so sorry. Like,
yeah.
And meanwhile, my daughter is screaming. And I don't know how to console her because I don't know what to do. And so I called my dad and I'm like, you need to come here.
Yeah.
I need you to sit with her because I need to do things.
Yeah.
And then I called my aunt. And I was like, I don't want to talk about it right now. I'm just letting you know she's gone. I have some calls to make. I'll call you later. And at this point, like, I had quit smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, go get me a box of cigarettes. Like, because I was sober at the point. I was sober at that time for 2.5 years. And I'm like, it's either I smoke a cigarette or I'm going to drink. And
yeah, let's pick one of them. Yeah.
And I called work because to me that was a priority call.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, she's gone. What do we need to do? And they were like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Because at this point, I'm numb.
You are going through the motions.
Yeah, there's nothing. And they don't tell you about that in grief.
No.
They don't talk about the numb feeling you feel for, it was almost a year.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I was just.
Yeah, grief fog is what we named it. Yeah.
Oh, man, it's rough, huh?
Yeah, especially being a mom. Yeah. Trying to keep the ship moving and navigating those feelings. And like you said, just how you couldn't even be there for your daughter. Like, I know exactly what that's like. Like, you're just going through the motions to, like, put one foot in front of the other, and then you're responsible for another, like, human beings. It's like, how am I supposed to do all of this?
Yeah. And function.
Yeah.
And function.
And for you, stay sober, stay down that path during the most difficult time in your life. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was definitely rough.
Yeah.
Needless to say. And then, but I got everything done. And I remember sitting in the funeral home and sorry, my son's
You're fine. Don't even worry about it.
I remember begging to see her body.
Yeah.
I wanted confirmation.
Like, yes, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
I wanted confirmation. Like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
And not that I didn't believe them. I'm a visual person.
Yep.
And there are still days, even almost 4 years later, there are still days where I'm like, she's just on vacation because there's no way I see her alive and then I get her in a box.
I know.
But they were like, we can't let you see her. And I'm like, why? They're like, because COVID, we don't know if it can spread. I'm like, I'm willing to take that risk. Like, this is a risk I'm willing to take. Like,
yeah,
I need to see it. And they're like, we're sorry, we can't do that. And I'm like, this is this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And I was livid. They were totally understanding. They were not mad. I may have flipped out a little bit, but they were so
Of course.
wonderful.
Yes.
And I was just like, I'm so sorry. And they're like,
Yeah.
no, you're in pain. Like it's okay.
Yes.
Okay. What do we need to do? And at that point, I was very grateful she wanted to be cremated because with COVID, they cremated.
Yeah.
You didn't have an option.
Yeah.
And I struggle a lot with the lack of closure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like I wasn't there with her. A nurse was, a stranger was with my mom when she died.
Yeah.
And she waited for them to come in the room.
Oh.
I swear she knew it. You know, I
Yeah.
swear, like, part of me knows that she knew our decision was, like, when do we let her go?
Yeah.
And I feel like she didn't want us to make that decision. She made it for us.
Yes, very much so.
We
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah.
I obviously don't have the science to back it up, but in my heart of hearts, knowing her,
Yeah.
and between not being able to see her, I don't know that it would have helped. You know,
Yeah.
I think it could have made things worse.
Yeah.
But between that and not being able to have a funeral for her,
Oh, yeah.
because let's be real, at that point, it was you can have 5 people.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are scared. Yeah. And you don't want to lose anyone else. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where I just went in go mode.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to clean out her apartment. And my landlord was like, I'm going to give you 3 months because it's been a lot. And I'm like, I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
I mean, she was living here for 16, 17 years. So, you know, to her, the landlord was family.
Yeah.
And she was a hoarder.
Hmm.
And I learned a lot about my mom going through her things.
I bet you did.
Yeah, a lot of things I knew and a lot of things I didn't know. And I would have really loved to see that side of her,
Yeah.
you know?
I know. I so know what you mean. It was like my mom and I really like got our footing, I would say, in the last like 2 years of her life. And like, it was the best it had ever been. And she was going to move to where I lived for the first time in my adult life. And it was like this second act of a life that we never got to have. So it was like I mourned like losing her so early. I like mourned the isolation, just like you talk about, like everything that it took from me. And then this whole idea of like what it was going to be, what we were so close to.
Yeah.
And that's what, like, gets me, like, I feel like I hold strong on a lot of things, but, like, her house here, we're in the process of selling it. Like, I feel like I'm strong, but when I go in there, I am like, it's just game over. Like, I was sitting there the other day, we're gonna have, like, a real estate brokers open, and I'm, like, sitting at the desk, and I just, like, close my eyes, and I'm like, "I just want her to be, like, in the kitchen, cooking, dropping off the kids for, like, doing their homework." Like, I can see it, but, like, we never got to have it. It's so tough.
Yeah, there's that literal grief.
Yeah.
And then there's the grief of what could have been.
Yeah.
And that is yeah, it's funny because I was just talking to my therapist today about how I notice I miss her more in the good times.
Oh, yeah.
I think in the hard times it's expected to miss them, right?
Yes.
But it's in the good moments
Yep.
that I'm
And the
like,
good moments and the
ooh,
quiet Sunday evenings when I would just wanna, like, give her a call.
yeah. Or like 3 a.m. because she was an insomniac, and if I couldn't
You knew she'd be
wake up,
awake.
but like we had gone through some really hard stuff when I was a kid. She was
Yeah.
not super maternal.
Yeah.
I won't go into detail, but not a great relationship.
Yeah.
And she spent a good 5 years apologizing and really changing and earning my trust and,
Yeah.
Proving that she could be better. And
Right.
we were finally at a place where, like, she would come down for dinner a few times a week. And, we had an arrangement. I cooked every night and we got to use her Wi-Fi. So, there's perks of living upstairs and downstairs.
Yes.
But I have a painting of hers in each room of my house. Add a little flair of her.
Oh.
And I used to get so mad because she would always get paint on everything. And I'm just like, stop.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the table that this laptop is on right now is full of paint spots that I refuse to wash because
no, don't.
And it's fucked up because I remember she got this really fluffy, soft, like purple blanket for Christmas one year, and I'm like, when you die, that's mine. And this was like 10 years ago, so it wasn't.
Yes, no, I know.
And I remember we were cleaning out her apartment, and by we I mean me, because it was COVID and she died from COVID, and everybody was scared because COVID can live on surfaces. And I'm like,
yeah,
at this point, I'm not even scared of getting COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, I was terrified if I thought about it.
Yeah. But you couldn't even go there. Yeah.
I didn't have the mental capacity, the emotional capacity to touch that. And I remember finding this blanket and just breaking.
Yeah.
Because I could see it so clearly, like the whole memory just play. And I sleep with a blanket every night.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's trying to find little pieces of her and things,
Yeah, absolutely.
It was definitely a core moment in my life. And a blue one, if you've ever seen Inside Out.
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's so good. So when there's core moments, if they're sad, they're blue. If there's anger, they're red. It was definitely a blue core moment.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to watch it.
It's super cute.
Yeah, absolutely. So so I want to bring people through the timeline just one more time, just because it affects me so much on the other side, just how fast this all happened.
Yeah.
So April 8th, she was positive. 10th, she was in the hospital. Her lungs were damaged so quickly, so fast, just like my mom's. It happened like this.
Yeah.
My mom was at her house. She'd gone to urgent care, I think twice or maybe once. One time they sent her home with oxygen. She was one day away from taking the antiviral that reduced the severe COVID, but she was one day outside of it, so she couldn't have it. So it happens that fast. 8th to the 10th. The 14th is the last time you'll ever talk to her on the phone. It's around the exact same time frame for me too. She calls me when I'm just like in the aisles of TJ Maxx, but I just knew it would be the last time that I ever talked to her. So then you've gone from the 18th to the 15th now. Now she's on life support. She's on the ventilator. And then your grandma gets it on the 26th. The 27th, you get to be with her, which is something that I think is rare during the pandemic. So that's, it's a weird dynamic to think about it, but what a gift that is that you got to be allowed to go in there,
Yeah, no, so it was the 28th that I sat with her because she passed on the 28th.
Okay. Yeah. And then on the 30th, your uncle passes away. And on the 4th, your mom is gone. And you are in business mode now because you've been assigned medical power of attorney. You're trying to figure out how to navigate this. So you're coming out the other side of all of this. And do you feel like the trauma, some of those like PTSD, like I can hear the dings and bells of the ICU, like they're like ding, ding. And like, I know the pause music still in my mind all this time later. Like, how did you do with the kind of like immediate PTSD of all of it?
Honestly, it didn't hit. June 1st, I found out I was pregnant with my son.
Wow.
I almost lost him.
Oh gosh.
And then it was all about cleaning out her apartment. And then it
Yeah.
was about, going on a baby moon before my son came for
Yeah.
my daughter's birthday. So we went up to New Hampshire for a weekend in an Airbnb away from everybody and everything. And
Yeah.
I was pregnant and I was looking forward to, we had gotten confirmation that, his screenings came back great.
Mm-hmm.
The mass on his brain had disappeared.
Wow.
Um, and like my daughter threw us a gender reveal.
Oh.
Um, I was just so grateful it was a boy.
Yeah.
I love my daughter,
Yes. Yeah.
but their girls are a lot.
I know. Yep. You're like, okay, I can do this.
Um,
In hindsight, do you think because you had so much going on, were you delaying some of the grief, or like, how do you feel?
I mean, I had gone back to work 2 weeks after she passed, so I
That's
don't know that I had
crazy.
time.
No, you didn't.
I didn't have
No.
time to stop and think, and I don't know that I wanted to.
Absolutely. Might have been a coping mechanism.
Oh, 100%. I was
Yeah.
avoiding full blown with like legit excuses.
Yeah.
Um, and then September 2nd, I had a psychotic break.
Yeah.
And my psychiatrist was like, "We're done." I saw a trash bag on the side of the road and I thought there was a body in it because of all the bodies I watched leave the nursing home.
Yeah.
And my psychiatrist was like, "We're done here. Like, we're pulling you out." So I did a day program, which was really helpful.
Yep.
And then I took a leave of absence from work.
Good.
Um, and I ended up on disability due to mental health issues.
Yeah.
Because my son was born January 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll be 3 soon. um, and that birth was traumatic. Um, it was right down the hall from where my mom died. Is where I
Oh,
birthed him.
God. Yeah.
And I hemorrhaged, and I just
Mm.
remember feeling her with me. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I can't explain it. And I just remember feeling her. And she used to do this thing where she would come up to you and just like rub your shoulder like 2 or 3
Mm.
times in a row. And like that was it. Like she would do that and then like give it a little pat and walk away. Like that was just her sign of like, hey, I'm right
Yeah.
here. And
Yeah.
um and I remember looking at his birth certificate, and my middle name is my mom's name. And I just remember
Mine too.
her name on the birth certificate and feeling that like her and my son would be connected because of this piece of paper.
Yeah.
Not because they're DNA related, but because of this.
Yeah.
And I feel this thing on my shoulder. So of course I look over and I'm like, and there's nobody there. And I ask my son's father and I'm like, did you just touch my shoulder? Like, he's like, no, is that why you looked over there? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, it was probably your mom.
Yeah.
And I just felt like this blanket of like warmth. And I
Yes.
just knew she was there.
Yeah.
Um, but it was so bittersweet
I
because
know.
as we're carrying him out, I'm walking out of the place where I just gave life down the hall from where my mom lost hers. And
Yeah.
it just goes to show how like death and life go hand in hand.
My mom passed away in the hospital that I was born in. And I was
Crazy.
like, holy shit, if full life, or, if life
Mental.
doesn't come full circle, I don't know. Like, I can remember walking in thinking, like, this is where she gave birth to me. And then I can remember, like, carrying her personal effects out and just being like,
Yeah.
yeah,
See, and I didn't even
think
walk
about it.
personal stuff outside. I didn't have the option to go in.
Yeah.
It's the
I
close
think that
that kills me.
I really feel, and I did another interview with another woman who lost her mom, so much earlier in the pandemic. And I've said to people, like, she was at the tail end, like, life had gone back to normal. And what a gift that was because they were willing to break protocol And there was a lot of like blessings that were wrapped in it being later in the pandemic. And like you said, you weren't able to see your mom's body. The other woman that I interviewed, she said the same thing. Like she hadn't gotten to see her mom, and she calls the funeral home and she's like, can I please come and see her? Like I haven't gotten to like hold her hand or see her. And they said like, no, I'm sorry, you can't. And it just killed her, it just tore her up. And I can't imagine on like the other side of things, like they let us come in so many times. It was, I can't imagine. I can't imagine early on what that would have been like.
It was isolating. I think it's like the
For
best.
sure. So isolating for the loved ones. And then I think what took me the longest to deal with was the isolation that my mom faced in the absolute fight of her life, being so alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like having everyone be in full PPE and only being able to see like people's eyes, and like, you know, I like say that I like can visualize this moment where I wish that I'm in there with her, like stroking her hair away, telling her to fight. And like, we never got that, that like moment when she was conscious. It wasn't until she'd gone on to the ventilator that they let us like really come in and be there. But it's just like, you're in the fight of your life alone. And
That in yeah, like the last time I talked to her, eh, the fear in her voice kind of overpowers. It
yeah,
kind of overpowers,
yeah,
the I love yous. And although I hold on to those daily, I'm the
yes,
last person she spoke to.
yes.
Um,
And a lot of people didn't
but
get that at all. Yeah.
no, and I think she knew, you know.
Yeah. I believe that too with my mom. I absolutely think she knew that she wasn't going to make it. I think she wanted to hold out hope, but I had found out like she had told her nurse, this like wonderful nurse, some of them were such a blessing,
Yeah,
that she didn't think she was going to make it. And I think she knew.
yeah.
And
That's
I
what my
hate that.
mom
I
said
hate
too.
that she knew. And then I just so feel for you that your mom, kind of like how you said, you think she made that decision so you didn't have to. Like, we were torn in my family in two different camps. It was like me feeling like if she hadn't gone on the ventilator, like an artificial means was keeping her alive. And
Yeah,
they had talked about the tracheotomy, just like you. But we had conversations of like, okay, well, what will her life look like with that tracheotomy? And they said, she won't be admitted to a long-term care facility. She would not go qualify for a nursing home. She's in no man's land. She may never come off of this. We don't even know once we get the trach in, since she's been so non-compliant with the ventilator, if we'll ever even be able to resedate her. Like, but my other family members like weren't ready to like let that go. They wanted to see like another organ fail or something. And my mom had put in there that she it was like three options in the will or in the medical power of attorney. I want to try everything. I want to try middle of the road, but don't prolong things, or I want to try nothing. She was middle of the road. And it got to a point where it was like teetering to, we're going to do everything, but that's not what my mom wanted. And
yeah,
her organs never gave out. We had to pull her off on our own. And that was,
that's hard.
they, oh my God, they take the sedation off. Her eyes have been closed for like 30 days and her eyes were like wide open. She was just staring at us. And every time we tried to talk to her heart rate would go up so much to the point where we knew she could hear us, but it was prolonging her death. So
Yeah,
she fought for an hour, and they had like really prepped us that it could be like her gasping for air. And thank
yeah,
God it was none of that. Cause I mean, that would be enough on its own. But yeah, we had to make that decision, and it was not a fun one. Just
no.
not. No.
I mean, I heard when I was sitting with my grandmother before I walked in the room. They warned me about the gasping,
Yeah.
and they warned me about the death groans.
Yeah. And the
And
rattling.
oh, the rattling.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
But I remember walking in there and eyes closed,
Mm-hmm.
They had her comfortable.
What a
And
gift
I
that is.
remember saying, "Hi, I'm here. Like, you're not
Yeah.
alone." And she just went like this.
Oh,
And I put my hand in her hand. And for 7.5 hours, I sat there while she clutched my hand to her chest.
oh my God.
And I was uncomfortable. And I was in full PPE. And I
Yeah.
would do it again
Oh God, yeah.
in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And whatever trauma that came along with, you do it again, you know?
100%. Because no one else could.
No. No.
I mean, the nursing home was allowing, 5 minutes per family to say goodbye.
Yeah.
I had the
Or
option.
through a window. Some people had to do it through a window.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of the reason that we had that option was because I worked there.
Yeah.
And I remember walking up to the new boss and I was like, "I want to go see my grandmother." And she was like, "No, you work on the first floor." And I'm like, "What does that matter?
Yeah.
What does that
Stop
matter?
it.
I'm in the building.
Yeah.
What does it matter? I still get tested. Like, what does it
Yeah.
matter?"
Yeah.
Like, and I remember going to HR and I was like, "Here's my plea." And she was
Yeah.
like, "Go, don't ask, just go."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Are you gonna?" And she was like, "Don't worry about it. Go." Like, HR is
Yeah.
here to keep administration in check.
Yeah.
And the administrator ended up coming in to see how I was doing.
Oh wow.
And I remember being surrounded by my coworkers. And they knew the situation with my mom.
Yeah.
My mom was the only staff member, as far as I know, at the time who died from COVID in a nursing home.
Wow.
I don't know the accuracy of that, but I know in at least the vicinity of where we're at, she was the only staff.
Wow. And your mom painted with the residents? Is that what she did?
She was
Mhm.
she was in the I can't even think of it. Um, like she was an activities director.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So she did arts and crafts with them. She painted with them. She
Yeah.
played bingo with them. She loved them, and in her spare time, if you will,
Yeah.
she sat with those who were dying, who didn't have
Yeah.
family to sit with them.
Yeah.
And I remember she would call me at like 2 a.m. sobbing.
Oh God.
They finally passed. But they weren't alone. You were
Yeah.
with them. And
Yeah.
I'm not super religious. I have a hard time
Mhm.
with that since everything that's happened. But my
Mhm.
mom was. And I know they were all waiting for her.
Yeah.
Every single one that she sat with
Absolutely.
were waiting for her.
Yeah.
And I just, it's those things you gotta hold on hope to.
Yeah. Absolutely. The little parts that, she was so strong to do that. That's incredible. That's so incredible. Well, if you had to kind of give 3 words to describe your current state of grief, because I believe they change so frequently. So cute. What would be your 3 words?
Grief isn't linear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So good.
I 1 minute you're fine and the next you're not.
I know.
One day you're, looking at a picture and it makes you smile. And the
Yeah.
next day you see the picture and you completely break.
Yeah.
One day you're in acceptance and the next day you're in denial.
Mhm.
Um, and it might not even be a full day. It might just be a few minutes.
Oh God, yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I just want to love you.
You just want to love me.
Aw.
Okay.
So
Okay.
cute.
Okay. Here. Can we right here?
He's like, Mom, this has been an hour.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's hard to tell where you are in grief.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to be like, oh, I'm doing well in grief because
Yeah.
maybe right now.
Yeah.
But grief isn't linear. And
No, and I think, I've had some friends that have gone through hard times, and I just say, like, it's okay to not be okay. Because, it's some days it's survival, some days you're at peace and you're feeling okay. Then my daughter says something to me and I just miss her. Then it's a missed moment. Then it's, it's just, you don't see it coming. We call them grief ambushes. And it's just like,
I
well,
love
there it is
that.
again. There it is. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I grew up in a Methodist church. My mom was really religious. And then when I went to college, I kind of like lost touch. We moved around a whole bunch. And then we've like finally settled in. And I went to Grief Share. And it's like a 13-week series at a church. And I think it's like changed everything for me. Like it really has. And it's like reconciling why God would do this to me
Yeah.
and changing that viewpoint and what like healing that can bring. That this was her plan, and this was the story for her. It doesn't mean I have to like it, but it wasn't done to me. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
just things
It
like that.
wasn't personal. I
Yeah.
try to remember that. It wasn't a personal attack that this happened.
No. And I try to remember it could have been worse. And then I try to look for all the little gifts that were like given throughout, because there was some, and it's just weird to think that way, but there definitely was. But what have you found is helpful for you? I think for me, it's talking about it. And that's why I started the podcast, is like, we're all going to face grief. And because of the pandemic, it's in staggering numbers. And people are like done talking about COVID. And it's like, well, this is still my life. It still took something from me. And then when I went to Grief Share, it was like, I really realized, like, God, this is so universal. Like,
Yeah.
from the woman who's sitting there who lost her son to drug abuse, to the, 90-year-old man whose wife went to the dentist and never came out. Like, this is universal. And it's like, we have to talk about it. So what do you feel like has helped you?
I mean, talking about it definitely helps. Just for me, it's living a life of values. It's about staying true to who I am, because she loved that. She loved me for who I am,
Yeah.
And like finding the little moments where like my kids show signs of her, like
Yes.
my son hugs like she did,
Oh, yeah.
and my daughter is so creative and artistic like she is,
Oh, that's so cool.
sorry.
No.
It's just finding those moments where, she used to, it didn't matter how late for work we were. She was not a morning person. If the sun was out, she would stop and for at least 30 seconds close her eyes and just,
Oh, I love it.
and you could see the smile across her face, and her shoulders were just relaxed, and she was, it was her.
Yeah, like her essence. Yeah.
Was her I mean, she's in the ocean. That was her that was her place,
I love it.
So it's about finding those moments.
Yeah.
And laughing through them or crying through whatever I have to do.
Yes.
In that moment, it's about moments like this where talking about her, I get to keep her alive.
Yep.
I heal out loud so that others don't feel alone.
Yes. Yes.
I feel like that's really, really important. And one thing that I do struggle with still is the new year.
I know.
Because I feel like
A lot.
I'm leaving her behind.
I know. Or like it's
Going
like
further away from her.
yes, it's another year. It's like
Yeah.
one doesn't stop, you know? But
And
it
I mean,
feels
when
like
you
it
get,
did sometimes. It feels
yeah,
like it stopped. I know.
and then it's like you said, people are done talking about it.
I know.
I will never be done talking about it. COVID scares me,
I
and
know.
I can say that. You know, a lot of my decisions after the reality kicked in, were made based off of, are we going to get COVID if we go?
Yeah.
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 Because I didn't want to leave my kids.
I know. And my daughter got COVID, I think 2.5, 3 weeks after my mom died. And we walked in and she was like hysterical. And I like took her into my arms and I was like, you listen to me. It was a different variant too. It was like the end of Delta and then whatever was Omicron or something was next. And I was like, Grandma was older. Like this is not the same. This doesn't mean that you're going to die, but it was so traumatic. And she just like made that connection.
Yeah.
And then it would be like we were at the tail end of masking and she couldn't understand. She's like, why don't people have on the mask? Of course she wanted to be done with it. But like it took her grandma, it changed all of us, like reconciling all that with a kid. How in the hell are you supposed to do that? You know?
No, my daughter was the same way when she got COVID. She was at a program and she called me sobbing and she's like, I have COVID. Mom, am I going to die? Like Meme did. And I'm like, honey, no. No, 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 no. No. And if we're being honest, I was terrified.
Yes. Yes.
Because I can sit here and say no, but I don't.
You don't know for sure. Yeah.
But in that moment, it's mom mode.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
reassurance. It's validation. It's comforting. And I immediately talked to the nurse and I'm like, you need to take her O2 twice a day. Like,
Oh my
if
God, I know.
we send
I
her to
know.
the hospital, like we're not playing games here. Like this is not.
No.
And after like day 4 or 5, she realized she was going to be okay. And I was like, that was really scary, huh? And she was like, you have no idea how terrified I was.
I think I got it maybe a week after my daughter. And so I call like the telehealth guy and I would like tell him, I'm like, listen, I just watched my mom die of this. Like, I'd really like the antiviral. And he was like, okay, well, I've got to like go through these qualifying questions with you. He was like asking all these things. I'm like overweight. I'm like, no, like all this stuff. And he was like, do you smoke? And I was like, no. And he's like, no, like ever. Have you ever smoked a cigarette? And I was like, yeah, maybe like once in college. He was like, okay, we can give it to you. It was just like, I was not gonna mess around. And so like I took the Paxlovid and I'm sure I didn't need it, but it was like too close to home. Like, we're not doing this. I never thought it would take a hold of her like it did. Like, no, not doing it. Like,
Nope.
give
That
me
was my
whatever
first.
tools we
Yep.
have.
We got it I guess not last year, the year before, 2022. My son spiked a fever and I took him to the doctor. And now, mind you, his pediatrician, it's my daughter's pediatrician, who she's had now for 15 years. She knows our family very well. And she called me and she was like, it's COVID. And I start hyperventilating because I've been with him every day.
Yeah.
And he was in bad shape.
Oh.
And I'm like, do I take him to the ER? What do I do? She's like, honey, no, it's normal for them to get a fever this high.
And I know they'll be able to rebound. Yeah.
What do you mean it's fine? I'm like,
I know.
this is fine.
I know.
So, of course, I'm testing. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, it's coming back negative. And then within the last minute, boop, a line shows up.
Oh, yeah. Like a pregnancy test. Yeah.
And I remember calling a few of my best friends. And I was like, I just want you to know I love you. I wrote like my end of life letters. Like, for me, I was done.
Yeah.
And then like it was day 9. I couldn't breathe.
Hmm.
And I have asthma, so it's not uncommon
Yeah.
that I couldn't breathe.
No, yeah.
And so I went to urgent care. My doctor's like, go to urgent care, you're gonna get seen quicker there.
Yeah.
And they can take you even if you have COVID.
Yeah.
And I remember the doctor berating me for not waiting another day. He was just like, you should have waited one more day. And I'm like, what is one more day gonna, like, I'm vaccinated. Like, technically, isn't it like 5 days and then 5 days masking? So like,
Yes.
but I'm sitting there and I'm terrified because
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my results on pneumonia,
Yeah.
which came back. I had pneumonia.
Oh my God.
And now I'm definite that I'm going to die from COVID-19
Yeah.
because my
Yeah.
mom
Nope.
did.
That would do it.
And I'm sobbing, and this dude's like, I can't believe you just didn't wait another day.
What in the
And
hell?
I'm like, my mom died from this. Like, are you that inconsiderate? I'm like, get me a new doctor. Like,
Yeah.
I'm done
No.
with
That's
it. Out of
it.
my
Yeah.
face. He's like, I'm the only doctor on. I was like, then I'm leaving. Like, give me the medicine that I need. And like,
Yeah.
and I remember calling my primary care, and he was just like, are you okay? Like, mentally, are you all right? And I was like,
Yeah.
nope. I called. I made an appointment with my therapist. She's godsend.
Yeah.
She makes time whenever. But it was in that moment that I was truly terrified. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is how my daughter felt when she,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, this is how she felt.
Yeah.
And then it got me thinking, like, how scared was my mom?
Oh my God. I know. I think about it.
It's that fear that, you know what I mean? Like, if it was like a peaceful,
I know.
but I don't think it was.
I don't think so either. And I think we'd be lying to ourselves if we try to paint that picture as much as I want to. I like remember we called in the middle of the night and they said that she was up to 45 to 50 breaths per minute and that somebody my age could do it for another 3 to 4 days. But since she had been fighting so long and she was 63, that she was going to tire out soon. And they didn't want it to get into emergency situation, but that she had been refusing the ventilator. So I remember in the dead of night, my husband is sleeping. I have my phone and I close my eyes and I try to take 50 breaths in 1 minute. And I'm like, she has just got to be scared out of her freaking mind and fighting for her absolute life.
Because they can remember that.
Yeah.
That's the part they remember. You know what I mean? Like, hearing the panic in my mom's voice, she's like, I can't breathe. And like gasping in between each word.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, this is significant.
Yeah.
And, I called my brother because I'm at work. I'm like, I'm going to call you when I get off. And, I called her when I got out of work and I'm talking to her and she's not talking. And then I hear the beeping and I'm like, okay, so this is real.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment that I was like, maybe she's right. Maybe she's not coming home.
Yeah.
But I, just as quick as it came, it left because I was like, we're not going there.
Yeah. I did. It was that I'm like just such a realist. And I always had this feeling like if she were to get COVID, it wouldn't be good. And I just knew from really early on, I had a pulse ox delivered to her house and it was like in the 80s. And then her significant other had ran to the bank. And when he came back, she was turning blue. And when she went to urgent care, she was at 42, which is like hypoxic. Like, she would have been alone for another hour. We would have lost her on the sofa. And it's just so crazy how quick it happens. It's just
so fast.
So fast. And then trying to wrap your head around, lungs are not something that can fix themselves. And so like the doctors would give my family all these analogies, like it's like her lungs are filled up with concrete. And, you see improvements in the O2 metrics, but it was because her lungs were no longer even qualifying or needing that much oxygen because there's only this much working room of capacity, right? And then they tried to give another one. They're like, your mom now has the working capacity of a newborn baby and is taking as many breaths as a newborn baby. And it's just like, Jesus. And then, there was ECMO was only for people who were young and in better health than she was. My mom had a really high BMI, and I don't think that was something that was talked about enough. I've seen it so much in all of the Facebook groups, how much COVID attacked overweight and obese people, and what a strong comorbidity like that was, like it just ravaged. It's just, yeah, there's so many things like that I just feel like people don't really realize,
Yeah. Well, because my mom was healthy.
Yeah.
But, like you said, my mom had a high BMI.
Yeah.
But at that point they were like, no, that shouldn't be making like this much of a difference of an impact. Yeah. But like it did.
I know.
It did. And it continued to. Yeah. And then they were like, oh, we need to add this to the list of, high risk. Yes. And I'm like, that's when I started getting scared because I'm like, what, like obese to your standards or obese, like, where are we going with this? Because, I know women who are 5'2" and 130 pounds and they're considered obese.
I know.
And so it's like, at what, like, what's the barrier that we're talking about here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's terrifying.
Yeah. And this is something I've never talked about with anybody else, but what was it like for you understanding like the inner workings of the ICU, calling so many times? Was there like continuity of care? Like I felt like there was such like a disconnect between like the night intensivist to the morning person, and then that person would be gone, that doctor would be gone for like a week, and then the nurses always were so much more involved. Like, did you have that experience at all?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like the weekend doctors were just there to do a job.
Yeah.
I didn't get many calls on the weekends from doctors.
Yeah.
When they found out my mom was brain dead, the doctor that was on that weekend was the doctor that we had during the week.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, he called personally. I genuinely think that if it wasn't him on, I wouldn't have gotten a call.
Yeah.
Gosh. But I feel like the nurses were so...
Oh, incredible.
They were so much more personable.
I know.
Took time. Like I had this one nurse, I believe her name was Amanda or Ashley. I remember it began with an A. I don't remember much else. And I remember it was the night they said she was brain dead. And I remember sitting outside, chain smoking, and it had started raining. Every time a family member dies, it rains. And I know that sounds really weird, but now the rain reminds me of death in that.
Yeah.
Bittersweet. I try to stand in the rain and just have it wash all my problems away.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting in the drizzle and chain smoking, and this nurse was just like, your mom, tell me about her.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, what? She's like, tell me about her. I just clocked out for break. I want to hear about your mom.
Oh, God, what an angel.
And she sat there for 2 hours and just wanted to know about who she was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't get that.
No.
And because of her, I felt confident in her care,
Yeah, and it's just like, I talked a lot about in Grief Share, like those women, men, and nurses, and janitors, and anyone that had to be anywhere near COVID hospital experience, like they are my heroes. Like, I really don't think the general public like could possibly fathom until you've lived it. I lived it for 30 days. Those people fought it for years. What have they gone through? How do we get them support? How, like, I can't even imagine. Like, I cannot. They had been doing it for so long by the time my mom was in there, and like just so beaten down and like
the burnout.
Yeah, and they knew that they could throw everything at it, but it wasn't going to be enough. And I think when my mom entered, it was like you had a 50-50 shot of leaving.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine like given everything that they did to only save 1 and 2, like, and what that must feel like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that I kind of hold on hope to is that they have found more treatment options, you know?
Yes.
You know, this thing came out in what, March of 2020?
Yeah, my kid was in kindergarten and now she's in 4th grade.
Yeah. And they didn't have options.
No, we didn't know anything.
And part of me feels like she was like a test on me. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because we had all the options of all the things you could try because of that, because
Yes.
I didn't know anything.
That's true. That's interesting. Yeah.
And I can genuinely say I don't have guilt in the decisions that I made for her treatment.
That's so good.
Okay. I can genuinely say that.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's good.
Because they were like, we have this option. Let's do it. This isn't working, but we can try this. Okay, where do I sign? Like,
yes.
I did everything I could.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of, I'm sure, as you know, there's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff that like you don't tell your kids about, and people don't see.
No.
And you know, because I was the primary medical person, there were a lot of conversations that I had with doctors that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
And I'm not hiding anything.
No, I know. Yeah.
But the details of how severe things were.
Yes.
I wasn't passing that on.
No, I know.
And it made me angry, because people were like, well, there's still hope. And I'm just like, I knew there wasn't.
Yeah.
I knew she was gone. You know what I mean? Like, I knew this was it.
Yeah.
Was I accepting that?
No.
Not at the time. But it was hard not to be like, well, this is what's really, like, this is how severe it, but nobody needed to hear the things that I heard. Nobody needed to know the things that I knew, like the details of how she passed. And they don't.
I remember I got to see her and she was proned with like, the tube coming out and everything. And I called my husband. I was like, listen, it's really bad. If you don't want me to show you, I won't. And I promise it's okay. And it was almost me being like, I don't want you to have to do this, And he was like, no, it's okay. And it's like only him, I, and my brother and a handful of family members, like, because I literally started panicking, like to try and clean her up. And then I was like, what the hell am I doing? And I like went to the nurses and I was like, listen, like more of the family is going to come. It's like, I know you're so busy. I don't want to ask you this, but can you please clean her up? And they did. And so it was like, no one else had to see that.
Yeah.
And I so know what you mean of just like, you don't want anybody. And then I struggled for a long time of like holding that memory. And it was in one of the Facebook groups, it was a woman who lost her daughter to COVID. And it was like some quote with a picture, but it was basically like, I will not let the moments of your passing be how you're remembered. And I was like, you know what? This is not how my mom would want me to remember her, to see that image. It would sometimes wake me up in the middle of the night early on. Like, I will never forget it, but I can consciously be like, no, like not doing that. Like, that's not how you're going to remember her, because it was, and I would imagine it's like that for anybody who sees their family or loved one, like in a medically compromised way that's not used to seeing it. It was not something that's fun.
No. And it's funny. Well, it's not funny. But it's funny because I found my old phone and I was like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
rolling through it, not realizing that, when we were video chatting with her, I was taking
Screenshot.
screenshots
Yeah, me too.
because I wanted to remind myself this is not what she would want.
I know. And in the early days, I looked at it a lot. And now I just like don't anymore. And I don't feel a need to. And it's like, that's not her. It's
But
not
you
her.
can't delete it.
No, I
No.
can't. I went to go trade in my phone and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
they were like, oh, well, it'll be X amount if you don't trade in. I'm like, I'm not giving you my phone.
Yeah.
Like,
No, it's
can't.
the last place I talked to her.
I know. I
Yeah.
know. It's the last place I can just like go to and hear the voicemails. And of course, like I can upload them somewhere else or I can save it onto something, but it's like, I'm just not ready.
Yeah.
I mean, all this time, I'm not ready. I don't want to give that phone up.
No. And you don't
No.
have to.
No.
That's,
Exactly.
people are like, oh, just delete the pictures. And I'm like, no.
No.
The last picture I have of my mother. Like, am I going to look at it? Nope, because it makes me sick and it makes me sad.
I know. We FaceTimed with her right after she got on the ventilator. Like my brother like held it up and I'm like squinting because I can't really see, but you can see like, and I didn't even remember screenshotting it, but I did.
Yeah.
And I've looked back at myself and been like, who is this person that I'm like looking at? Like not only my mom, but like myself. Like who was I in that moment? Like Jesus, like
Yeah.
wild. And I say a lot of times, like there was the person that I was before and the person that I am after all of this. And I'm profoundly changed. And I do feel a weight and a responsibility to live life well, and to make her proud.
100%. Honestly, that's what like fuels my sobriety. Because I've
Yeah.
had every, people are like, if you need a drink, like I understand, who are super supportive over my sobriety. And I'm like, no, because one of the last things she told me was like, I'm so proud of you
Oh
for
my
being
God.
sober because I was so proud of it. I had struggled with addiction since I was like 13 years old.
Yeah.
And I got sober and she got to see that.
Yes. Who you were. Yeah.
In my head, like, yes, relapse and lapse, it's nothing, there's nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's a reset button. And that's
Yeah.
just how I feel about it personally.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow, I actually hit 5 years of sobriety.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I just hear her voice.
That's so cool.
It's just like, I'm so proud of you, Jessa. Like, that's just,
I
it's like
love
keep
it.
me going.
Yes, absolutely.
You gotta
Well, I
find
can't.
little things.
Yeah, just hearing her and knowing that she would be so proud of you and continuing her legacy. I can't thank you enough for joining me tonight. And I feel like we'll have to do like a part 2 of this. And honestly, like this has been so like everything you say, I'm just like, yes, I know what you mean. Yes. Like it's just, I hope for others out there that lost their loved ones to COVID, like, please just remember you're not alone. Like all of this was so isolating, but like you are not alone. And you and I are a testament to that, like we never knew each other before this and what a shared experience two total strangers can have, right? Like,
Yeah. And it's not
wild.
necessarily the experience, it's the emotions under it.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I don't know about you, but for me, when my mom died, I felt like I was stranded in a deserted desert. Like,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
there was nobody in sight that understood how I was feeling.
Yeah.
And I don't wish this on anyone.
No, neither. Not my worst enemy. No.
And part of me is grateful that there are other people who get it.
Absolutely.
I'm not alone, but I
No.
wish I was. I wish
Yes.
I was alone,
No, I
but
know.
I'm grateful that I'm
Yes.
not.
Yes. 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 It's like that weird part of COVID where you're like, You don't want to be alone, but you're like, I'd do anything if nobody else had to feel this. For me, it was sitting at a restaurant. She'd maybe been gone like 2 weeks. And I'm looking and I'm thinking like, oh my God, everyone here is going to in some capacity know what this feels like. I'm just first. It's just my turn first. Like everyone is going to know this.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, like, yeah.
How did, if you don't mind me asking you a question?
No, go ahead.
What was your first thought the next morning?
Oh my God, that I had to tell my kids. She died in the middle of the night, and so it was like, I'll tell you. I'll back up a little bit. I did an interview, the last one, with a man who lost his wife to cancer, and his pastor comes and tells him she had been fighting really hard, and it was her second relapse of breast cancer, spread everywhere. And the pastor said, "It's okay if you feel relieved." And he had written this in a book. And I read the book before he came on for the interview. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I didn't know I needed permission that it was okay to like even feel that. And it was so hard to watch her fight. And I was so happy she didn't have to fight anymore. Not happy, but so relieved. And so after that kind of like feeling, like I literally think I was just like, oh my God, she doesn't have to do this anymore. And then it was, now I got to go tell my kids. And that was the single hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. My daughter more so than my son. I went into my son. Nobody had told him. I was like, honey, you know how grandma's been sick? And he was like, yeah, she went to be with God. And I was like, what? And I like look at my husband and I was like, did you tell him? And he was like, no. I was like, Hudson, what did you say? And he was like, Grandma went to be with God. And I'm just like, I didn't have to tell him. I didn't have to tell him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he wasn't even in kindergarten yet, And it was like, I had just before that told my daughter, and she was like hysterical and so sad that she couldn't say goodbye. And so like, I remember just like grabbing her and putting her in my lap and being like, no, you can say goodbye now. Like grandma is with us. Like you can say goodbye right now. Like you did not miss that opportunity. Like we can say goodbye. She's here with us now. Like, and it was like something out of a movie. And then I go to Hudson. He's just like, yeah, she's with God. I'm like, what? Okay.
Kids, man, they'll surprise you.
I know, right? What about you? What was your kind of feelings?
Well, I mean, my mom died early in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, early to some.
Yeah.
But I just remember waking up the next day and it was sunny out. And I was pissed that people were enjoying their days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do they get to be happy? Like my whole world just crumbled.
Yeah.
And these people are out here laughing. And I was projecting 100%. But when I look back, that made me so angry that like others were enjoying life while mine was falling apart.
Yeah.
And I just remember going, what do we do from here? Like I just felt so lost. And I went into, let's make a list. Let's make a list of all things we need to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just, why are the birds chirping? Why is the sun out? Like it should be a gloomy day. Like why doesn't the outside match my inside?
Yeah.
And it was, my son's father who said she loved the sun though.
Oh.
And I don't even know if he realized that he said it.
Yep.
It was just in passing. And I mean, it was a perfect day for her,
Yeah. I love that.
So.
That's so special.
I saw it as like such a, I was
Yeah.
like a jerk then,
Yes.
But now I swear she can control the weather. On my
Yeah.
birthday, it was supposed to rain all day, and
Mhm.
it's raining, and I'm with a few friends, and I have him, and we're all going to my friend's house to, hang out with the kids and like go in the pool, and it's raining, and I'm like, really, Mom? And then I hear this big bang of thunder, and I'm like, oh, that's her telling me to shut up and wait a minute. And then it was sunny for the rest of the day. She was like, just give me a minute.
That's so crazy. I've had so many like moments like that. Like, I wrote a book. It's about like the last 30 days, and every like day is a chapter of the last 30 days of her life. And so I'm gonna reach behind here. I literally get the very first copy delivered, like literally. And I'm just like, oh God, I don't know. Like, should I tell this story? Like, what do I do? And I'm here all by myself, and I hear this like commotion. And I'm like, we're getting broken into. Like, what in the hell? Who's that? And all of a sudden, like my kitchen is like right there. I see a hawk go and land in my kitchen. And it's like hanging out on my kitchen faucet. And I'm like, what in the hell? I'm like scared. I'm screaming. I don't do birds. And my husband, I call him, he like thinks that there's like a pigeon in the house. I'm like, this thing is huge. Like, it's not a pigeon. So I like am sending pictures to my best friend, and she's like, Megan. She's like, do you know what? And I tell her, like, it's just so weird. Like, I was thinking about this book, and it's such like a final moment before I decide what I'm gonna do. And hawk's in my house. And she like looks at the meaning of a hawk, and it's all like, I mean, the metaphors for it are like insane of how connected it is.
Yeah.
So like I have to have like my neighbor come. He gets the hawk out of the house, but it's like,
Which is
oh
not
my
a little
God.
bird.
No, it was like this big. It was like bigger than my face. But it's like these moments where I'm like, really, Mom? Like, okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay.
They let you know. They let
I
you
know.
know. And it's funny because like I very much believe in tarot card readings.
Yeah.
With a grain of salt. You have to take it with a grain of salt.
Yes.
Not everything is written in stone, because you could make one different move and it's going to change your whole,
Yes.
per usual. And the woman that I go to, she is a medium,
Hmm.
and she was like, "Oh, your mom's here." She was sitting there tapping her foot, like, "Are you going to tell her that I'm here or not?"
Oh my
And
God.
she was explaining what she was wearing, and it was an outfit that was one of my mom's favorites. And I was like, "Okay, so she's here.
Yeah.
Hey, Mom, what's
Yeah.
up?" And she
Yeah.
was like, "Do you have any questions for her?" I'm like, "Is she mad that she's in the ocean?" She was like,
Mm.
"Hell no. I'm free." She was like,
Oh.
"I'm not a fucking Christmas decoration. Don't put me on a
Yes. No, not
mantle."
on. I know.
Yeah, and I was like, "Okay." And so much guilt was lifted because I'm like, I don't know if she wanted to be buried with her mom. Like,
I know. I
we didn't have
know.
that conversation. I knew she wanted to be cremated and she wanted her organs donated. Obviously, the
They
organs
won't take them.
not
I
be
know I tried
donated.
to. Yeah.
I mean, even if we could have, her organs were gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, But
Yep.
I was like, okay,
I
nice to see
know.
you.
Yeah,
She's
exactly. It's wild.
she's like, keep your eyes open. She's like, I show you signs all the time and you only pick up on some. And
Yeah.
ever since then, I've been picking up on so many. And
I
I'm just
know.
like, okay, simmer down, simmer down. I get it. You're here. I love you. I'm glad that you're here.
I
Like,
know. I know.
um,
Absolutely.
and it's just a constant reminder. And then I
Yeah.
have her writing tattooed on my arm.
Oh,
So
I love it.
it's just, she has to sign all of her paintings.
Oh, so cool.
And I found one cleaning her apartment that I'd never seen,
Yeah.
addressed to me.
Oh my God.
And it says, like, I love you, Jessa, with her signature little flower that she did. And
How
so I
cool.
was like, okay. And I went and got it tattooed.
I love it. My mom had written, when I took out her personal effects, I had found pages of notes. She was on the full face oxygen, so she couldn't speak. And a lot of them were like medical requests, like, can I get some water or whatever? And it said on there, I love all. and I am learning patience. And I was thinking about getting like the I love all like somewhere. And for a long time, I felt like, God, it would just be a constant reminder that she's like gone, but I don't feel that way anymore. So I still might go do it, like,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Honestly, it's one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't thank you enough for joining me tonight and just opening your heart to tell me your story. I think your mom will be celebrating with you tomorrow for that 5th year anniversary. And congratulations, and just thanks again for telling me your story.
Thanks for listening.